Good morning, good morning, good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to today's Traefik online meetup. We are excited to have you here. What's going on? My name is Patricia Dugan. I am the head of community for Traefik, supported by Containus. And I lead and design our marketing initiatives and work closely with our community and our developer pool. What's going on today is a Traefik online meetup with a cool company called Rookout. Itiel Shwartz, the lead production engineer, is going to be speaking. The way this works today is we're going to have a session. He's going to share a lot of really cool stuff. They've had a huge journey using Traefik, and the intention today is for him to share their journey and help you avoid pitfalls they experience. So he's going to talk about installing Traefik on Kubernetes, combining Traefik with your CI to deploy developer environments, routing traffic by HTTP headers, and more. So with that, we'll have some cool information from him, and then we'll go on to a question and answer. So at the end, we will answer your questions. And what's going to happen is in the chat box, we welcome you to enter all of your questions. And then at the end, I'll go ahead and ask those of Itiel, and we'll talk about them. After that, the video will be made available as well as a gist with the questions and answers. Also, next week we have Perixlis Perry, I call him, from Holiday Check. He is a senior engineer over there, and he is going to talk to us about how they're using Traefik at Holiday Check. And I will put the registration link in the chat box as well. So with that, I would like to say thank you all for attending. We're super stoked. Find us in our Slack channel under support if you want to talk about anything, or go into the news section and start chatting so we can get to know you. And now I'm going to pass the microphone to Itiel, and we're going to listen to him share his wise expertise on using Traefik. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patricia. I'll try my best. So let me just share the screen with you guys. And I hope everyone can see the slides, right? So yeah, we're going to start.
Great.
Yeah, great. So first of all, we talked about the house rules, and I'll speak a little bit about, myself. I joined Rookout as the first developer, and basically I built all of the CI, CD, Kubernetes deployment, pretty much everything from the start. So I'm quite familiar both with Traefik and Kubernetes and CI/CD. And a little bit about Rookout, our company. So our company basically allows developers to get the data that they need from their production environment when they need it. So we allow developers to put non-breaking breakpoints. So no matter where your code is running on, if it's Kubernetes, Docker, on-prem, serverless, no matter where, we basically allow you to get the data that you need in one click without the need to redeploy it or to write additional logs and then redeploy it. You just click on a button and you get all the data that you need. This is an example from our application, our web application. So let's talk a little bit about the agenda for today. So we're going to start very small with a very basic Traefik example of using Traefik in Kubernetes, and we're going to make things a little more complicated and a little more fun as we go on. I want to say that I hope there will be things for everyone, from the beginner, for like the first step, people who are not really used to Kubernetes or to Ingress and Traefik, but also for advanced users that already know Traefik and Kubernetes. And I hope I can also bring some very cool, nice tricks and tips for you guys, you veterans. So before we get started, I want to speak about the journey that we here at Rookout had before going to Traefik. And at first we had just Google Load Balancer, manual load balancer, that you go to the Google UI. We are running mainly on JKE, which is Google Kubernetes Engine. And at first we had just Google Load Balancer, and it was like the scariest place on our infrastructure, because every time we needed to do some change, things just fall apart, and it was really a very bad area. But as I joined the company, we understood that we have to do something to make it a lot easier and simpler to configure the load balancing part. And then we moved to Nginx Ingress, which is very nice. It was quite good, but it lacked some major capabilities. And one of them is gRPC that my company is using quite a lot. And Nginx didn't have the support for it, and I'm happy to say that Traefik did have it. So we migrated from Nginx into Traefik, and we are happy with Traefik ever since. So this is our journey. And let's get started with this demo application. And so before we get started, we have a clean Kubernetes cluster, and I'm going to install Helm. I already did all of this, but if you don't really know Helm, it's not a big thing. It's quite easy. You can think about it as a homebrew or YAM for Kubernetes, and that basically means that it allows you to install pre-configured Kubernetes resources very, very easily. You don't need to panic. You don't really need Helm in order to use Traefik, but it makes it a lot easier. So that's nice. So I already installed it, and I forgot to say that everything that you're going to see today is on our GitHub repository. I'm going to click there on the next slide. So no need to stress. You can just follow the step at your own time, and it should work quite lovely, I hope. So like I said, the first step is just to install Helm, and this makes things a little bit easier. And the second step is to install a very basic application. So for this demos, I installed a very basic Flask application. It's like 20 lines of code or something like that. Very basic and nothing special about here. So now it's time to get for the real thing. And the first step is to install the traffic controller inside our application. So I'm just going to click on this link. And yeah. So like I said, I'm going to use Helm in order to deploy everything. So in our case, in order to deploy the Traefik Ingress controller, all we need to do is this quite simple line. So the minute we do this line, we are getting both a Google Load Balancer, in our case, and a Traefik pod and a Traefik Ingress controller. So a lot of buzzwords, I know. I try my best to explain them. So the load balancer is basically just a load balancer that routes data from outside the world into your Kubernetes cluster. It's very basic, very dumb, let's say. And we have the Ingress controller. Ingress controller and the Ingress pod. It allows you to use the Ingress in order to configure your Traefik. So if you are familiar with Traefik, you know you are configuring using a TOML, and everything is very clear and very nice. But in Kubernetes, there is an object, a resource, a Kubernetes resource that is called an ingress. And basically it lets you to pre-configure the load balancer, not using the normal TOML, but instead using Kubernetes annotation, Kubernetes resources. So we need to do this so we can, so after we are going to do this, then you can deploy a new ingress, and the ingress will configure the Traefik load balancer for you. So it's a little bit tricky, I know. Just trust me for now, and on the next slide, I'm sure things will get a lot simpler because we're going to deploy the ingress. So like I said, for this, I'm not doing anything manual. I'm just using something the community already made for me. And this is the Traefik Helm recipe. Okay, so now it's time to expose our application into the world, into you guys. And to do so, we are on the next step of our application on GitHub. So let me close this. And okay, so what is an ingress? I'm really going to show you the whole resource for all of you who don't really know Kubernetes that much. So an ingress is a Kubernetes resource, and I'm going to focus on three things. So the first thing is this line. And this say, okay, I want this ingress to configure Traefik for me, the Traefik ingress controller. Without this line in Google, then you will configure the basic Google load balancer. And like I said, we didn't want to use the normal load balancer. We wanted to use Traefik. So this line is very important. Other from that, we have two very important lines, and this is these two lines. And if you already know Traefik, then you know that you have the front end and you have the back end. So the front end is like the rules that, okay, we have a new request now, where are we going to route it to? So think about these two lines as two different routing rules that say, each time you see a request that go to traefik.rookout.demo.com, just pass it on to these routes. And every time you see something with a slash, just pass it on to hello world service. So this is the backend, like the Traefik backend. This is the Traefik frontend. And like you can see, I've used only Kubernetes resources in order to configure Traefik for me. So in Ingress, again, Ingress is like a way to say Traefik, I want you to be configured on this manner, right here, without the need to write TOML or to deploy TOML into your Kubernetes cluster. So now that you've done everything, you can also go to Traefik Rookout /demo. And as you can see, I'm in the cloud. The webinar is fun. I at least hope so, that it's fun, and everything seems to be working great. So this is like the very minimum of deploying Traefik into Kubernetes. And this is how our application and our journey started here at Rookout. So now I'm going to close this and let's go for the next slide. And this is split your Traefik by paths. So I'm going to talk about exposing another backend application. And like I said, when we just started here at Rookout, we had one service, but as we grew, we have a lot more microservices. We have our front end, we have our back end, we have an API, GraphQL, we use quite a lot of technologies. And we want Traefik to load balance the data between those different backends. So in order to do so, we're going to split our Traefik using the paths. And again, this line just deploy another hello world service. And we're going to use the same ingress that we used before, but I've added another section, this section. And this section basically says, every time you see that the request go rookout.com/another, just point it out to another backend service. So now let's just see how it looks like. I'm going to open both of them. As you can see, both of them are on the same domain. So this is our old application. It was great and everything was good. But now I also have this application, which is super red and scary. Yeah, I know. I'm not a front-end developer. I apologize for you. And as you can see, they are both on the same domain, but they are completely different backend service. So this, again, this is the path that here at Rookout we started in, and we moved from one backend to multiple backends. And again, it's like in Traefik TOML when you configure different backends and different frontends to match those backends. Okay, so now I'm going to speak about using completely different Traefik instances in order to make sure everything is good in production. And what do I mean by that? So you generally want to test your things before going into the production environment. You want to have some staging or sandbox or something. So using Traefik, you can have one production environment, one staging environment, and both those environments are going to be served using two completely different Traefiks, and they are going to be configured completely different. And that basically means that you can test your configuration on the staging environment to make sure everything is working, everything is well. And only after you test this, then you can go and deploy it into production. And actually here at Rookout, we also use it to allow developers to have their own custom developer branch. So they can deploy their own Traefik and their own backend and GraphQL and everything. So it's very convenient. And in order to do so, the first thing we need to do is to deploy another load balancer and another ingress class. So like the first slide, I just need to do this one-liner. And the only difference here is that I'm going to say ingress class instead of normal traffic. I'm going to call it staging traffic. And I'm going to deploy it on the staging namespace, as you can see. And now I need to deploy another ingress, and this ingress is exactly like the last ingress I showed you, but the only difference is this line. I'm going to say that the ingress class is not the staging traffic, but instead the ingress class is staging traffic instead of normal traffic. So now I have both of this application. This is the old application. This is the new application. And as you can see, there are two different domains, and they are served using two completely different load balancers and by completely two different traffic configuration. So now I can test my configuration on this environment, make sure everything is good, and then go to this environment, my production environment. So it's very nice, very cool. The ingress class is super quick. So you can also, if you have the right CI/CD, then you can have the developers deploy their own custom environment by branch or pull request. So very nice, and Traefik support it wonderfully. So now let's go back into our slides and just close everything. Okay, so now that we had Traefik and everything was good and we had multiple traffics, we came across a new issue. And that is, we wanted to route the traffic not by header, not by path or domain, but by header. And why did we need this? We serve a lot of customers, and we wanted them, each customer, to go to his own backend, but we didn't want to send some secret as part of the URL. So that means we had to send it as part of the headers. But sadly, Kubernetes doesn't support the routing by headers at the moment, which is a bummer. But lucky for us, Traefik does support this ability. So we're going to see how we can do routing by headers, not using the normal Kubernetes Ingress, but using the Traefik normal deployment. Okay, so this slide is a little bit different because, like I said, we're going to use we are going to deploy everything by ourselves without the helm, without the Traefik helm. So let's go to the config map. And for those of you who don't really know config map, a config map is a very easy way of Kubernetes, a Kubernetes resource that allows you to upload the configuration into the cluster very easily. So all of this part, if you know Traefik, then I'm sure it will be very custom for you guys, because it's a basic Traefik configuration, nothing Kubernetes about it. And basically we say, if you have the header backend version 1, please go to the first server. If you have the header backend version 2, please go to this header, to this backend service. And this is like a catch-all rule for the first server. And so this is our config map. We also have our Traefik instance. Like I said, we need to deploy everything ourselves. So I'm using the latest Traefik. Actually, there is a Traefik 2 at the moment, which is still in alpha, and it was released before I created this. So yeah, I'm using 1.7.9, and we're loading the Traefik config map on these lines. And a very, very important rule, tip that we learn on the hard way is this magic line. And this line basically means every time you deploy this application, please check that the config map didn't change. The config map I showed you on the last tab. And if it did change, please deploy a new Traefik instance for me. So without this line, what would have happened is that we would deploy the Traefik, we would change the config map, but the Traefik won't see the changes because it's not aware of those new changes. So this line basically means each time you do a deployment, please check that the config map did not change. And if it did change, please deploy a new Traefik instance. super important, super nice and easy. So we also had this line. And we also deployed the load balancer because, like I said, we need some sort of external thing that will load the traffic from the outside world into our own cluster. So yeah, that's very cool. We use it in production and it's really nice. So like I said, let's see how it looks like. So this is the normal backend service. This is like the route all and it's green and everything is great. But let's see what happens when I'm using a different header. So I'm going to use Postman. So this is, I'm going to send the header backend version 1. I'm going to hit send and it's the same green screen. But now when I'm going to do 2, then it's a completely different backend, and using Traefik, I was able to route those requests to the same domain only by headers. Super nice. And here at Rookout, we use it in order to, like I said, enhance our security when customers are sending data to us. Okay, great. So we talked about the routing by header, and now I'm going to show you another cool trick Traefik has to offer. And so let's say you have some sort of application. It's quite sensitive, but you still need to expose it to the outside world for some reason. So when you do this, you can use the Kubernetes Ingress and Traefik to use Google authentication very, very easily, like almost zero configuration, and to have your application authenticated and yeah, authenticated. So first of all, just show so you can understand what I'm talking about. Let's try and go here. And as you can see, I'm in the cloud. It's like the same backend server we saw earlier, but now let me try and go to incognito. So I'm going to open the same tab. And as you can see, I just did it in English, sorry about that. So yeah, as you can see, the same URL just redirected me to the Google authentication. So now let's go back to our slide. And let's understand how do we implement this for our own backend. So first of all, how it's going to look like. So the client is going to go to Traefik. Traefik is going to authenticate the request using some gatekeeper, and the gatekeeper is going to forward the request back to the service that the client requested at the first place. So how I'm going to do this is really easily. All we need to do is to deploy the OAuth traffic forward auth. It's another Docker container. So it's another GitHub repository, great GitHub repository, and we're going to deploy it into our cluster. Let me show you how. So this is the auth YAML. So here we need to have the client ID and the client secret for the Google Authenticator. And I'm saying that I want to allow only Rookout domain to enter this website. So this is very, very basic and very easy. And then using this tree annotation for our ingress, I'm saying Traefik, each time you get a new request, please authenticate it using the Traefik auth. So using 3 lines of code in Traefik, we are able to fully secure our application. And before even one packet arrives to the service, we have someone in the middle that protects our backend application. So this is how we deployed it. I also generated some client secrets, so it won't be exposed on the YAML itself. So it's inside Kubernetes secret. So now let's see that I can actually log in. So I'm going to add my email and my password. And I have 2FA, so 1 second, let me just allow it. And voila, as you can see, now I can go and visit this website in a secure manner. Very nice, can be very handy, and it's not really hard to configure. As long as you know, you can just take the demo from the repository. Okay, so I'm just going to close this. Okay, so this is the part of the demo. Another very nice features that we use here at Rookout is, first of all, we use external DNS. I didn't show it to you guys to make sure all of the domains are created automatically. And we are also using Let's Encrypt in order to generate SSL automatically. Traefik can do so for you. So these two lines basically means that if you configure your pipeline correctly, you can have a new domain with an SSL with traffic load balancing in a click of the button, because Let's Encrypt take care of the SSL, and external DNS just create the domain for you. So you're like, this is my ingress, and external DNS goes to the provider, if it's Route 53 or Cloudflare or Google, and create the domain for you. Very convenient. We are using Traefik in order to load balance gRPC request, which if you are using gRPC, then Traefik is like the #1 solution. It's very nice. We had a very short experience with Istio, but Traefik, like Envoy and Istio, but Traefik was simpler and just better. It has a very great integration with Prometheus and Datadog. Here we use mainly Datadog. I'm going to show you on the next slide, like print screen from our dashboards. And if you are using Kibana or Elk or Splunk, then just remember that the Traefik can be configured to print out all of the logs in a JSON manner and not like a one big string. And it makes it a lot easier to parse and index the data. So this is other cool capabilities I didn't really talk about. So yeah, this is like auto-generated. The minute you integrate between Traefik and Datadog, it creates some very basic dashboard for you that you can put monitors on and have alerts and everything. So we use it quite heavily. And I think that about it. You can please feel free to talk to me after this or by email or Twitter or whatever is convenient to you. If you have any kind of question, Patricia, the floor is yours.
Well, thanks. I'm going to tell a joke. No, I'm just kidding. Nice work, Itiel, and thank you everyone for participating. Looks like we have a question coming in. Given that you are using namespaces to differentiate between environments, staging, production, etc., are you implementing any additional security measures to achieve complete traffic isolation between requests to staging and production? Signed, Dinesh. Thanks, Dinesh.
Thanks, Dinesh. So like I said, like the minute you use two completely different ingress classes, the namespace, it's like more of a Kubernetes thing that they are both on completely on a different DNS namespace. But the fact that you use a different ingress, a traffic ingress and an ingress controller, this basically promises that all of the data that is sent to production and the data that is sent to staging has two completely different IPs. And it's not only that the domain is different, but the IP is different, the Google load balancer is different, the traffic is different. So you shouldn't have a mix and match between both of these environments. So namespace is nice, but the more important thing is to have two different ingress classes. And again, I'm talking for experience. If you don't have it, then what can happen is some developers on your team will going to hit the staging, doing some load testing, and then real life customers are going to feel the impact of those requests, which is not good. So yeah, it's very important to separate between the two.
Cool, that's a great explanation. And thanks for that question, Dinesh. I was curious your thoughts around tracing, because I know Trond Hindenes from Rick's TV a couple of weeks ago was saying they use our tracing functionality a lot and that we love it. What's your thoughts on that?
On the tracing, so first of all, I'm a big fan of open tracing, and so yeah, I'm biased, and you have a great integration with what's their name?
Prometheus?
No, not Prometheus.
Oh.
The open tracing. It's also
Jaeger.
Yeah, Jaeger. Yeah, exactly. You have very similar logos, so yeah, it confuses me. So I think it's super important. I think tracing, if you have one microservice, then okay, it doesn't really matter. But the second that you have more than one microservice, it becomes a really big deal. So you can trace your requests from like the client endpoint into Traefik backend, some backend server that the backend is using, and you can see everything. So we use it quite heavily, both request tracing, and we are also using Traefik, like in case there are issues like 500, 404, we have alerts on almost all of the metrics that Traefik export for Datadog. So if you're using Datadog, it's really seamlessly. If you're using Prometheus, you can also achieve the same capabilities. Maybe you need to work a little bit harder, but yeah, you know, it's the main thing that we look at when we are having any kind of issue.
Okay, sweet. Now we have a special guest, Colin, who has written some amazing posts, by the way, about Traefik, asking a question. Great presentation, Itiel. Does Rookout use Traefik shifting for Canary testing or circuit breakers?
Actually, we don't use it at the moment. The Canary looks like a very promising feature that Traefiks allow. We don't really implemented it at the moment, but we do look at it, and it looks like very cool application, like application of Traefik, because the hardest thing for anyone that is deploying rapidly into production, and here at Rookout, we deploy like 10 or 15 times a day at some days. So you want to know that your production environment is good. So we don't use Canary at the moment. We usually have the staging environment. We have the production environment. And after the deployment, we have automatical test and automatic rollback to the previous Traefik and previous state. But we are not using it at the moment. But it looks very cool, and I'm sure we'll use it in the future.
Sweet. He's also interested what tools you're using over there at Rookout for building and deploying.
So actually I had a very nice blog post, if I can say so, about Jenkins, and we use 100% Jenkins plus Helm. It did require some tweaking, but the combination between Jenkins, Helm, and Traefik, and the external DNS and Auto SSL, it really allows our developers to move very, very, very quickly without needing to be afraid. We have automatic rollback both on staging and production. And we also allow developers to deploy their whole system in a completely different namespace using their own configuration and to test everything before going into staging or into production. So we allow them to have a completely full sandbox, and it's only a click of a button for them in Jenkins. And behind the scenes, there are very wonderful things that are happening, but mainly Jenkins and Helm.
Super cool. My internet connection got unstable there for a second. So I was worried we lost everyone. Cool. Well, and then I have one question, unless something else comes in, which is around Let's Encrypt. I'd just love to know your thoughts about it.
I really enjoyed it. I don't really have a lot to say. As a DevOps, I hate to configure and to go and deal with TLS certificate. I don't love it. It's very manual. It's very tiresome. Each time that I need to do something like this by hand, I get super annoyed. So the combination between Traefik and Let's Encrypt, it's great because, you know, we stop thinking about when is it going to be, when do we need to regenerate our TLS certificate, or how do we create it? Everything is 100% automatical. And so, yeah, the combination is great. And if you're not using it, then it's too bad, because it's not that hard to configure, and it saves you a ton of time and ton of frustration.
Yeah, that's cool. Well said. And Dinesh asks, does Rookout use a GitOps workflow?
I'm not sure if he's talking about like something like Wave has, like GitOps, like a real tool. Basically, we develop everything by hand. So we're 100% GitOps. Everything goes by pull requests, and the minute something goes to master, then it automatically starts a staging workflow. And in case it succeeded, then we updated our configuration on the GitHub. So we are 100% GitOps, but without any special tools. Each commit in master has its own tag in GitHub, and we also deploy our artifact into Helm chart to the Google Cloud. So yeah, 100% GitOps. And again, if you want to test your configuration, it's very easy that you can just push something to master and you're relaxed, because if something will go wrong, it will just roll back everything for you.
Super sweet. Now, since we're kind of wrapping up here, I want to, if you don't mind pulling up your logo, I'd like to give Polly, the VP of Marketing, some props here. This cute Rook is their logo, and a Rook is apparently a very smart bird. So this is their logo, yeah. And props to her and the team on that. If there are no more questions, I'd like to kind of start wrapping this down. Itiel, did you have anything else you wanted to share, or point people over to your GitHub or anything like that, your Twitter?
So first of all, feel free to contact me on Twitter or on my GitHub. We posted everything we just saw on Rookout GitHub, so you can just go and follow the steps, and I hope it will save you a lot of time, because some of those things looks quite easy now. When I look back, it was very frustrating to make sure everything works as expected. And we also have a very nice blog, a technical blog here at Rookout, so you can go and read about what we do on the open source world and on the Jenkins and CI/CD. And of course, if you are having any issue debugging your production online, so like Rookout is here to help you make your life a lot easier, because our tool just make the deployment obsolete in a lot of cases when you just need to get data from a production server.
Sweet. Well, Jakob said, I'm not letting you go so quickly. I'm a fan of Docker Swarm, and we're using heavily Traefik integrated with Docker Swarm. I'm aware that you are in Kubernetes, but do you have any experience or even tested Traefik plus Swarm comparing to your existing stack?
So sadly, I can't say that we ever tried it. I did try Docker Compose and local Traefik, and both of those experiences were great. I never tried Docker Swarm. I just jumped from an EC Packer into Kubernetes, so there was nothing on the middle for me. I never tried it, so sadly, I don't really have something to say about it. The Docker and Docker Compose integration are great, so yeah.
Well, at least you're being honest. And while you're doing that, I'm adding a couple of things. Thank you for your answer, he says. So with that, I'll tell you about what's coming up. We have Holiday Check on April 4th, and what that's going to be about is similar to Rookout's story in Itiel. It's kind of a like what not to do. At Holiday Check, they've been using Traefik as the backbone for their migration of their microservice ecosystem to Kubernetes. And so that's kind of a real inside look at how they have been navigating that. And if you don't know, Holiday Check AG is the biggest independent hotel review and booking portal in the German-speaking area. Then we have Manuel Zapp, who is also based out of Germany, and he's a consultant and an engineer. And he's going to talk about, I really wanted to bring this up because you mentioned GKE a few times today. He's going to talk about using Kubernetes as an Ingress controller deployed on GKE, Google Kubernetes Engine. So that's what we have coming up. Now, as far as today goes, this will be turned into a video, and sent to the Oscars. And then we'll have a Q&A, the Q&A, which will go to a GitHub gist completed by our lovely Itiel. And I just want to thank you so much, and thank all the people who joined us. And thank you, Rookout, for your time and sharing your team. So.
Sure, thank you, Patricia, and thank the team.
I'll miss the zebra. Tell your wife hello. Thank you, everyone, for coming. We'll see you online. Follow us on Twitter.
Bye-bye.
Bye.